Congressional Democrats are not backing down on their health care and budget demands, raising the possibility of a government shutdown at midnight. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the details.
Democrats continue to demand Republicans to include in the short-term funding bill a provision to extend Obamacare tax subsidies. They say this is the only way Republicans will get their votes to keep the government open. Listen.
We have very large differences on health care and on their ability to undo whatever budget we agree to through rescissions and through impoundment.
So what Schumer is trying to do here is essentially to use this shutdown as leverage to get assurances from Republicans that whatever budget they agree to for next year, Republicans won't then try to undermine later by using more pocket rescissions packages to go back and cut from that agreed upon 2026 budget. Now remember, the Republican-controlled House already passed a short-term extension of government funding to keep the lights on through November, but it failed in the Senate because of lack of Democrat support. So Republicans say there's nothing to negotiate on their bill because it's simply meant to extend the government funding levels that both Democrats and Republicans already agreed to last year. Basically, the White House meeting did nothing to prevent the possibility of a shutdown.
If they want to talk about how to fix American healthcare policy, let's do it. The Speaker would love to do it. The Senate Majority Leader would love to do it. Let's work on it together. But let's do it in the context of an open government that's providing essential services to the American people. That's all that we're proposing to do. And the fact that they refuse to do that shows how unreasonable their position is. I think we're headed to a shutdown.
So what happens if the federal government shuts down? It's actually a partial shutdown where some essential services are kept. Mail service will continue to run, Social Security checks will still go out, essential workers like FBI investigators, CIA officials, among others, will stay on duty, though those who are still going to work while the government shut down won't get paid until Congress acts, but then those who are furloughed during the shutdown will get back pay for the time that they were out. Though a government shutdown this time will have more consequences than previous ones. That's because the Trump administration directed agencies to use this opportunity to get a better understanding of how they can reduce the federal workforce permanently to further the administration's plans of slashing the overall size of the federal workforce. Trump this morning was asked how many federal workers he plans to lay off. Here's what he said.
Well, we may do a lot, and that's only because of the Democrats. And as you know, they wanted to be able to take care of people that have come into our country illegally, and no system can handle that.
But for the time being, Republicans are pinning their hopes on the fact that Democrats might cave and let go of their demands like they did back in March. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
A potential government shutdown could be just hours away as Republicans and Democrats remain at odds over a proposed stopgap spending bill. Joining us now to discuss is Mike Leon, NTD News contributor and host of the Can We Please Talk podcast. And we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent at the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. First of all, good afternoon to you both. Mike, I'll start with you today. How much of this, is about substantive issues, and how much about is it trying to make the other side look like they're to blame?
That's a great first question. First off, good to see you all. Let me see, percentage-wise, I think it's probably a 50-50 line. I was watching Speaker Thune today on C-SPAN earlier, and Chuck Schumer, both giving their different speeches and talking about the different times that there's been government shutdowns, and Thune was talking about the different times that Democrats have all voted on the same side, obviously blaming them now because they need the 8 votes to get this to pass. And then in turn, you hear Schumer talking about that, they've called the offices different times to try to meet throughout this entire period, and that this is all Republicans' fault. So again, and Thune said this in his speech, so I don't want to steal his thunder. He said, this is what politics is, right? This is what the word politics was invented. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. So I think a lot of it is performative. The substantive part, maybe I'll change my percentage here, Don, and make it a little 60-40, because I think that the actual substantive part in terms of the ACA credits and these expiring before midnight are things that do impact millions of Americans starting later tonight at 12 midnight. And then there's also the fact that there's going to be government employees, like Melina just mentioned, that are going to be furloughed, that ones that are going to have to work for free while the shutdown happens. The last time we had a shutdown that lasted about 35 days was between the 2018-2019 period. Nobody wants to go to work and work for free, Don. Nobody wants to get back pay, a month or so later. So this is really coming up against the 24th hour here. And we truly need something to come to fruition fruition over these next couple of hours.
So, Tony, what do you think? How much of this is about the issues at hand?
Well, I mean, I think that the issue at hand is really about the direction of both parties. And I think that I agree with Mike, of course, because he and I very much agree on the performative part of politics and then versus the policy side. In this case, though, I find them linked. And the reason I say that is because right now the Democrat Party is searching desperately for a message before midterms. And so what you have is a bill that they already voted on, that they already agreed to. Again, the Trump administration through the executive office suggested pocket rescissions, and then the Supreme Court upheld that for the next 30 days, that being a week ago. So about 23 days now, let's say, remaining to go until Congress does anything regarding that. So what we have right now is a Democrat Senate who is trying to play tough. And Hakeem Jeffries, as you see on the B-roll on the screen to my right, also trying this kind of performative yelling, and it's just not working. There's no actual substantive message here. Again, when the RNC Twitter account, one of the right-wing kind of research and receipt accounts, can post you saying the exact opposite thing a year ago, it's not a good look. And again, as we get into the full midterm season, a 14-month stint in any administration, you have an entire party that's essentially built around finding a message and then refusing to do so. So I actually had a conversation with a Democrat representative this morning out of Indiana who's very frustrated because he feels right now the Democrats need to be looking for a message. Instead, they're whining about a bill they already agreed on a year ago. It just doesn't look good.
So, Mike, broadly speaking, do you think there's actually enough time for lawmakers to, debate, negotiate, and actually pass spending bills?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I just reached out to a Democratic lawmaker as well to come on the show later today because Speaker Johnson sent the House into recess for up until October 7th, if I'm not mistaken. That was one of the things that Schumer had mentioned on the floor there, on the Senate floor. So is there enough time? I mean, there's always enough time, Don, right? Like, obviously, we can find enough time to potentially get. Now, is there enough time to negotiate on the issue? Remember, they need 8 Democratic votes right now. They have 0. And right now it's 2:14 p.m. Eastern time. So if I had to be a betting man, if I was wagering this live bet right now on one of the betting applications, I would 100% hammer the bet to us have a government shutdown starting at midnight. I don't think that there is enough time, which is why, back to Tony's point, the House tried to pass this clean CR recently and give the extension of the 45 days so that way we can continue to debate these issues. But as Tony and I have talked about in this segment numerous times throughout our history doing this, those are just punts, right? That's just that's just, pushing it further down the trough and not really fully funding the government through the entirety of the session of Congress. So that's the problem with all of this right now, is that there is time, but there's not enough time, if you know what I mean.
Okay, Tony, I can't even tell you the number of times I had to report a government shutdown each year. I really don't want to report on it anymore. How do we avoid this?
So you've actually touched on the reason that this doesn't matter to Americans. I saw a Kamala Harris campaign staffer say, well, actually, 43% of the public believes that a shutdown is bad. 36% say it's the other party's fault. And I hate to tell you this, but more and more Americans just don't care. Because after the 432nd time we've come on the air to discuss, the recent stopgap measures, will Johnson get it through with a slim majority? Will the Senate hold out, or will Cory Booker stand and yell for another 18 hours? Americans have seen this before. They know how it's going to go. The Democrats are, in fact, going to cave, because if they don't, Russell Vought from the OMB is going to swing on through and say, you know what, a lot of these federal workers we don't need. And, when the executive branch is given additional authority through a shutdown, this has really cornered the Democrats into a lose-lose situation that, again, they did themselves. When the election in 2024 took place and Americans made it very clear they wanted parties to work together, they wanted Democrats to move to the right, not Republicans to move to the left. That was the mandate. The mandate was not for the left to move further to the left. We can pretend otherwise, but it is true. Moderate Democrats performed far better than those on the far, far, far to the left side of the aisle. And instead of coming to the table and negotiating, not making it easy for states like Illinois, Minnesota, California to take federal dollars for their own citizens and then use state money to then fund illegal immigrant healthcare needs, as the Chicago Tribune reported in 2019 and again in 2021. Well, it's just kind of awkward, yet an unfortunate truth and reality that when Democrats say, I'm not budging, give us the money, or we're going to shut the government down. Again, the Americans that do care, albeit fewer of them than ever before, they're not rallying behind Democrats. They're just browsing social media angrily. And unfortunately, slacktivism doesn't win votes.
Okay, Mike, can we get your response? Is there a way that we can actually avoid this issue at a structural level?
Yeah, I have to respond to some of that, but not in a bad way. I'm actually going to piggyback on something Tony said there. See, I would love to be in either camp right now because the blame game is very easy. So let me just tell you what I've spoken to a few of those moderate Democrats that Tony mentioned: Congressman Glenn Ivey, Congressman Seth Moulton, Congressman Pat Ryan. They're all in that similar moderate Democrat type mold. All of them have done town halls recently, and Congressman Glenn Ivey said on my show, he said, whenever I talk to constituents, they realize we don't have the numbers. Why is it that we don't have the numbers? Because this mandate that we've been talking about, that Tony even mentioned there, played out in the election, giving Republicans control of the House, the Senate, and the executive branch. So it's very easy for Democrats to just say, you control everything. What do you need us for? Now, on the flip side, the counter to that is math, as I just mentioned before. They need 60 votes to fund this. So they do need 8 Democrats. And as Thune did earlier today on C-SPAN in his speech, he brought out all the times that Democrats cited to fund the government over these last, I want to say it's 24, 36 months, whatever it was, on his whiteboard that he brought out there. And it was in the 98% to 100% of votes, meaning that they know how to keep the government open. They just don't want to do it this time. So it is very easy to play the blame game from the political angle. But to Tony's point, people don't care. Not only that, but they have short attention spans. They're not going to remember this. Now, Don, your broader question of how do we avoid this? Well, we avoid it because polling always shows us that we do want bipartisanship, but we never get it. Here's a perfect example of both of them needing to work together because 52 plus 8 is 60, and neither of them are willing to budge on certain things. And we saw it yesterday play out. Both of them went out there in respective conferences right there on the White House lawn to reporters and blamed the other side, as opposed to saying, hey, when are we going to meet again? Because we only got 27 hours. When are we going to do this? It's a perfect example of why people are so turned off to American politics, just because within that whole stanza, they met inside the Oval, and then they go out there each respectively and continue to blame the other side. When Tony said it and I said it, Americans do want both of these parties to start working together. That's why you get slim majorities every single time, whether it be in the House or the Senate.
Okay, Tony, please respond to any point you see fit that Mike said there. And also, I want your comments on, there's talk of the administration using the shutdown as an opportunity to carry out layoffs.
Oh, I mean, that was an obvious. Russ Vought is someone that I know. He's been looking forward to doing so, given the opportunity, for quite a long time. The majority of the right believes there are a lot of federal bureaucratic agencies that simply staff too many people. And I say that knowing many of the individuals who, for example, in housing and urban development, people whose entire jobs were essentially to write essays on why using one style of Adobe brick is more water soluble than the next tile of Adobe style brick. I'm sorry, you don't need a full-time government position to do that. And I do believe that there are a lot of things to cut in that area. That's something the right's kind of used as an axe to grind for a long time, and rightly so in a lot of ways. Now, that said, I'll piggyback off of Mike's final point there by saying one of the reasons we don't see a lot of calls for bipartisanship that turn into action bipartisanship is because, Mike, you know as well as I know that as soon as we get out of this particular shutdown crisis, the very next day, Schumer and Cory Booker and Mazie Hirono and the rest of the Democrats in the Senate, save one or two, are going to go to cameras and go, those bunch of fascist, MAGA, Nazi, blankety blanks, calling them a threat of the country that want to disappear people and take away women's rights and stick them in red robes and bonnets and all this other nonsense. And then all of a sudden it comes time for budget and reconciliation or continuing resolutions. And it's, okay, now I'm ready to work with you and things like that. Because we have started blending the performative edge of politics, like Ayanna Pressley screaming on network television, with the sensible voices inside committee, because we've blended those so closely in American politics, we are getting closer to a Canadian junior high cafeteria style parliament fight that is very uncooperative. And is the answer to that, what you and I suggest, which is, the can we please talk? Can we please find the common ground? Absolutely. But with the lack of common ground being pushed forward, especially in a lot of the current rhetoric in the climate. Obviously, we've talked about that at length ad nauseum. It's really harder to say, well, Americans may vote for this or want this on paper. They'll say, I want bipartisanship. But then if you ask them what that means or who needs to give up ground, the answer is never both sides need to give up ground. The answer is never, well, I want the left and the right to both come to the center and do something in the middle. It's very, very low. It's like 10% of people who answered yes on the first, and then that being the second question. And that's really disappointing and unfortunate and doesn't really spell positive, let's say, kumbaya vibes in the future.
Okay, Mike, you were talking about the blame game earlier. Will the messaging of this shutdown from either party, whether it's blame or anything else, sway public opinion in favor of either party? Any impact on the upcoming midterms?
No. I mean, Don,
he's correct.
I mean, they're both doing it. I mean, like, and back to Tony's point, right? The performative. Tony, you left out a couple performers there, like a Nancy Mace and some of the other ones. I gotta, and this is the thing. I want the debate about the policy, right? We've come on here a bunch of times and talked about, just look at immigration, for example, right? I've mentioned this a bunch. There's a policy change. Before it was civil. Now it's being treated as criminal. Those are things that people don't understand because the devil's in the details and it's minutia stuff. But for Tony and I, we eat that type of stuff up. Then we can talk about it and debate it. Other people don't want to consume that. They want the performative part of this. They want the Nancy Mace going out there and telling you this is all Democrats' fault and to blame and stuff like that. And no admission and just going out there and doing that. And others on the left too. I'm not absolving them. So I don't want the performance element. And by the way, there's a great study being done about members of Congress that tend to go on television more versus ones that don't. And where they kind of rank and file in terms of their stature and their social presence versus ones that don't. It's a great study. I wish I knew I had it offhand of where it is. I don't know if the Pew Center did it or I forget who, but this is what we see now, where people are trying to lift themselves to the next job. You know, I just mentioned Congressman Seth Moulton a second ago. He's running for Senate. He's not even going to be a member of Congress. He's going to challenge a seat, you know, in the Senate. So why? Because he wants a better job, because he wants to raise his profile. So that performance element, unfortunately, it affects the American people because it affects his constituents that got him voted on. And, you know, all that door-to-door knocking and doing all that grassroots stuff, that tends to go out the window once you get into D.C. and realize, you know what, I need to be in front of the cameras and raise my stature a little bit more, and I'll do some grandiose posturing and things like that. Thomas Massie all of a sudden is a household name. Nobody knew who Thomas Massie was 3 years ago, except for that, maybe that outburst with him and Jamal Bowman on the Capitol steps talking about gun control. You didn't know who Thomas Massie was. Now you know who he is because he's been on Theo Von's show and things like that. The performative element needs to leave this, and I think the American people see that, so I don't think any public polling will sway one way or the other. They'll blame both of them for this shutdown.
Okay, well, we're basically out of time today. Tony, if you have anything to add quickly.
Just that when you go to a hockey game, you don't really want to see the game. You want to see fights. That's what the American people want right now. It's unfortunate. And again, just like the big, beautiful bill meant nothing really to voters, this shutdown's not going to mean anything either. And that's really bad for the opposition party come midterm.
All right. I think we can end it there. Thank you both once again. Tony, Mike, pleasure.